The glass doors of the luxury car dealership slid open with a soft hiss, but no one inside seemed to notice. A tall man in a simple black hoodie and jeans stepped in, his hands tucked into his pockets. He paused for a moment, scanning the gleaming cars under the bright showroom lights. The place smelled of leather and fresh polish, the kind of scent that hinted at wealth and exclusivity. Employees in crisp suits bustled around, smiling and greeting well-dressed customers, offering handshakes and eager sales pitches. But as the man took a slow step forward, no one approached him. He watched as a salesperson rushed past, barely sparing him a glance before turning to a couple in designer outfits. The man, Elijah Carter, was used to being overlooked in places like these. It wasn't the first time, and he doubted it would be the last. But today was different. Today he wasn't here just to browse. He was here to test something he had experienced too many times before. He strolled past a sleek black sports car, running his fingers lightly along the hood. Still no one came. A younger salesman looked in his direction, hesitated for a split second, then turned away, choosing instead to greet another man in an expensive suit. Elijah sighed and shook his head. He could hear snatches of conversation around him. Laughter, pleasantries, discussions of payment plans and financing options. Yet, not a single greeting was directed at him. Minutes passed. Elijah finally walked up to a sales counter where a woman in a navy blue blazer was typing something on her computer. She didn't look up. Clearing his throat, he spoke in a polite, even tone. "Excuse me, I'd like to check out the new luxury models. Could someone help me?" The woman barely glanced at him. "Someone will be with you shortly," she said dismissively before returning to her screen. Elijah arched an eyebrow. He had seen at least 3 other customers come in after him, each of whom had been greeted immediately. Yet here he was, standing at the counter, ignored like an afterthought. He let out a small chuckle, more amused than annoyed. If only they knew who he really was. Elijah Carter wasn't just another potential customer. He wasn't just a man in a hoodie walking in off the street. He was the CEO of Carter Automotive, one of the most successful car manufacturing companies in the country. The very luxury models they were selling, his company had helped design their engines. His name was on the paperwork that sealed million-dollar deals with car manufacturers around the world. But here, in this moment, he was just another black man in casual clothes. And to these salespeople, that meant he wasn't worth their time. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had seen this kind of thing happen to others. Today he was experiencing it firsthand. Just then, a man in a tailored gray suit entered the showroom. A senior salesman, tall with graying hair, instantly sprang into action, greeting him with a broad smile. "Welcome, sir. How can I assist you today?" Elijah watched as the two shook hands, the salesman's voice filled with enthusiasm. He didn't miss the way the man threw a quick glance in his direction, as if making sure Elijah was still standing there. But still no approach, no offer of assistance. Something inside him hardened. He had been patient long enough. With slow, deliberate steps, Elijah turned and walked towards the center of the showroom. He stopped next to a striking white convertible, one of the dealership's most expensive models. His fingers drummed lightly against the hood as he looked around. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but commanding. The room fell silent. Salespeople turned, their conversations faltering. Customers glanced his way, curious. The woman at the counter finally looked up. Elijah let the silence linger for a moment before he spoke again. "I was just wondering, how long does a customer have to wait before being acknowledged in this dealership?" His tone was light, almost conversational, but there was no mistaking the steel underneath. A few of the salespeople exchanged uneasy glances. The younger salesman who had ignored him earlier shifted on his feet. The senior salesman in the gray suit cleared his throat and took a step forward, offering a practiced smile. "Sir, I apologize if you felt unattended. We are quite busy today, but I'd be happy to." Elijah held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. He wasn't done. "You see," he continued, "I walked in almost 20 minutes ago. I watched as multiple customers, dressed differently than me, were greeted, helped, even offered drinks." He gestured towards the counter. "I spoke to one of your staff members directly and was told someone would assist me. That was 10 minutes ago." The woman behind the counter swallowed hard. Elijah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "So, tell me, was my money not worth as much as theirs?" A tense silence stretched across the showroom. And then, one of the customers, a middle-aged man in a navy blue suit, let out a quiet oof. Someone shifted uncomfortably nearby. The younger salesman paled slightly, as if realizing where this was going. Elijah exhaled and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a sleek black leather wallet and flipped it open. Inside was an exclusive business card, one that very few people in the industry had ever seen in person. The senior salesman's eyes widened. His jaw tightened as recognition dawned on him. "You!" The man started, his voice suddenly unsure. Elijah gave him a slow nod. "Yes," he said simply. Now the energy in the room had changed completely. Salespeople who had been ignoring him moments ago were suddenly hyper-focused. The woman at the counter straightened in her chair. A nervous laugh bubbled up from someone in the back. Elijah didn't move, didn't rush to explain himself. He just let the weight of the moment settle. And then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he slid the business card onto the hood of the convertible. That was when everything truly shifted. What happened next would leave the entire showroom in stunned silence. The room felt different now. The air, once buzzing with easy chatter and sales pitches, had turned heavy with tension. Elijah stood there, his expression unreadable, as his business card lay untouched on the glossy hood of the convertible. No one moved. No one spoke. The senior salesman, who had been so eager to assist the suited customer moments ago, now seemed unsure of himself. His fingers twitched at his sides as if debating whether to pick up the card or pretend it wasn't there. Elijah saw it all, the nervous glances between employees, the way the woman at the counter suddenly busied herself with her computer screen, the young salesman shifting awkwardly as if hoping to disappear into the floor. No one wanted to admit what had just happened. A slow smirk tugged at the corner of Elijah's lips. He had expected this. He had been through situations like this before, but somehow it always played out the same way. The moment they realized who he was, everything changed. But why should it? He wasn't any different now than he had been 20 minutes ago when they ignored him. His status, his wealth, his influence, it had always been there. But to them, it had only just appeared because he revealed it. Elijah let the silence stretch, letting them sit in their discomfort. He wasn't in a rush. Finally, the senior salesman cleared his throat, forcing a tight smile as he reached for the card. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked it up and read the name embossed in sleek silver lettering. The moment he saw it, his eyes widened, and his throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Elijah Carter," he murmured under his breath. The name carried weight and it hit him hard. He looked up quickly, his expression shifting from polite dismissal to pure regret. "Mr. Carter," he said, forcing a chuckle that didn't quite land. I didn't realize." Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Didn't realize what?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. The man's mouth opened and closed for a second before he glanced at his colleagues for support. No one stepped in to save him. Elijah's gaze flicked toward the young salesman who had ignored him earlier, then back to the senior salesman. "Didn't realize I had money. Didn't realize I was worth your time." He let the questions linger, though he already knew the answer. The senior salesman let out a nervous laugh. No, of course not, sir. It was just, an oversight, I assure you." Elijah let out a soft hum, unimpressed. "An oversight." The woman at the counter finally spoke up, her voice tight with nerves. "Mr. Carter, we truly apologize for the misunderstanding. If we had known." Elijah cut her off with a sharp look. If you had known. He took a slow step forward, his presence suddenly heavier. You mean if you had known I was worth something to you? That's the problem, isn't it? A few customers nearby were pretending not to eavesdrop, but their stolen glances and the slight hush in the room made it clear they were paying attention. Elijah glanced around the showroom, then exhaled softly. He wasn't here to humiliate anyone, but he also wasn't going to let this slide. This isn't just about me, he said, his voice steady. It's about how you treat people who don't look like they belong. About the way you decide who deserves respect based on their clothes, their appearance, whatever quick judgment you make the second they walk through that door. The senior salesman's face flushed. Sir, I assure you we don't. Elijah held up a hand, stopping him. I don't need your excuses. He tapped his card against his palm. You know, I own multiple high-end cars. I know the value of good service. But what I see here. He shook his head. This tells me everything I need to know about how you do business. The young salesman suddenly blurted out. It wasn't personal, sir. We assumed. He stopped himself too late. Elijah let out a dry chuckle. You assumed. He nodded slowly. That's exactly the issue. The weight of his words settled over them. No one argued. No one interrupted. Then, as if shaking off the moment, Elijah turned his attention back to the convertible he had been admiring earlier. He ran his hand along the sleek design, appreciating the craftsmanship. You know, he said thoughtfully, I was considering buying one of these today. Maybe even two. The senior salesman straightened immediately. Sir, we'd be honored to. But now, Elijah continued, cutting him off. I'm not so sure. The senior salesman paled. Mr. Carter, we'd love to make this right. Let me personally. Elijah held up a finger. Let me ask you something. The man froze. Of course. Elijah studied him carefully. Would you be treating me like this if I were still just a guy in a hoodie? The man's mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence that followed was answer enough. Elijah gave him a knowing smile. Then he turned on his heel and walked toward the exit, his steps unhurried. He could feel the tension behind him, the weight of unspoken words, the silent regrets hanging in the air. Just before he reached the door, he paused. He didn't look back, but his voice carried through the showroom. Respect isn't something you reserve for people who look like they can afford it, he said. It's something you show to everyone. And with that, he walked out, leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget the lesson he had just given them. But this story wasn't over yet. As Elijah stepped outside, the crisp air hit his face, but his mind was still inside that dealership, replaying every moment. He had known what would happen before he even walked through the doors, but experiencing it firsthand always left a different kind of weight on his chest. He glanced at his watch. A few minutes ago, he had been just another customer to them, one they could afford to ignore. Now they were likely scrambling, whispering behind his back, trying to figure out if they had just made the worst mistake of their careers. Elijah pulled out his phone and stared at the screen for a moment before dialing a number. The call rang twice before a deep voice answered. Yo, E. What's good? Reggie, Elijah said, his tone measured. I need you to do something for me. Reggie, his longtime friend and business associate, picked up on the shift in his voice immediately. What happened? Elijah exhaled slowly, glancing back at the dealership's massive glass windows. Through the reflection, he could see the senior salesman pacing inside, running a hand through his hair as he talked to the woman at the counter. The younger salesman was hunched over his desk, avoiding eye contact with customers. I'll explain later, Elijah said. But I need you to send someone in. Not dressed up, just casual like I was. Have them ask about the same car I was looking at. There was a pause before Reggie responded. You think they'll do it again? I know they will, Elijah murmured. I just want to see how deep this problem runs. Reggie let out a low chuckle. "Man, you really about to make some people sweat today." Elijah smirked. "They brought it on themselves." He ended the call and slid his phone back into his pocket. He had no intention of letting this go. It wasn't just about him. This was about every person who had walked into that dealership and been dismissed before they even had a chance to speak. 15 minutes later, Elijah was sitting in his car across the street when a young man in a plain t-shirt and jeans approached the dealership entrance. Reggie had sent Marcus, one of their interns, a bright, ambitious kid with a good head on his shoulders. Elijah watched as Marcus stepped inside. First, nothing happened. The same glass doors slid open. The same showroom buzzed with activity. Marcus walked in confidently, his posture relaxed, his eyes scanning the room. Elijah leaned forward slightly, watching. And then, just like before, nothing. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Marcus lingered by the convertible Elijah had been interested in, running his hand along the hood the same way Elijah had. Still no one approached. A couple of salespeople looked his way but quickly turned back to their conversations. Elijah shook his head. Same pattern. Same ignorance. But then something changed. A new salesman, one Elijah hadn't seen earlier, walked onto the showroom floor. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, dressed in a sharp blazer and slacks. She glanced around, saw Marcus standing alone by the car, and without hesitation walked straight up to him. Elijah sat up. For the first time since this had started, someone had done the right thing. Inside, Marcus looked surprised as the woman smiled warmly and extended her hand. He shook it, and she immediately launched into an enthusiastic introduction, asking what kind of car he was looking for and if she could assist him. Elijah couldn't hear the conversation, but the body language told him everything. Marcus relaxed. The woman was engaged, professional, treating him like an actual customer rather than an afterthought. Elijah felt a small, satisfied nod coming on. But inside the dealership, the other salespeople had noticed. The senior salesman and the woman from the counter exchanged looks. The younger salesman shifted uncomfortably in his chair, watching the interaction with something close to guilt. Then, to Elijah's amusement, the senior salesman finally made a move. The older man walked briskly across the showroom, straight toward Marcus and the young woman. He put on his best salesman smile, the same one he hadn't bothered to offer Elijah earlier, and smoothly inserted himself into the conversation. Elijah already knew what was happening. The senior salesman wasn't happy about someone disrupting the status quo. He wasn't about to let a junior employee make them all look bad. Inside, Marcus played his part well, nodding politely as the senior salesman took over, subtly pushing the woman aside with practiced authority. But the woman didn't back down completely. Elijah noticed the way she stood her ground, how her brows furrowed slightly as the senior salesman tried to take over the sale. She looked at Marcus and then back at the senior salesman as if realizing exactly what was happening. And she didn't like it. Elijah smirked. She had integrity. That was rare in places like this. Another few minutes passed, and Marcus finally nodded as if considering his options. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. A moment later, Elijah's phone buzzed. "Marcus. They did it again. But one of them actually helped me. Woman named Lisa. Seemed real." Elijah's fingers hovered over his screen. He looked back up at the dealership, watching Lisa as she subtly stepped away from the conversation, shaking her head slightly as if she was realizing in real time just how things worked around here. She wasn't part of the problem. She might even be part of the solution. Elijah made a decision. He put his car into gear and pulled back into the dealership's parking lot. The moment he stepped inside again, the energy shifted. The senior salesman noticed him first. His eyes widened slightly, and he stiffened, clearly caught between his instincts to dismiss and his realization of who Elijah was. Elijah's gaze, however, wasn't on him. He walked past the man without a second glance and headed straight for Lisa. She blinked in surprise as he approached. "Can I help you, sir?" Elijah smiled. This time it was genuine. Yeah, I think you can. The senior salesman shifted uncomfortably, but Elijah ignored him. I was in here earlier, Elijah continued, watching Lisa's expression closely. Didn't get a warm welcome from most of your colleagues. Lisa pressed her lips together, clearly understanding what he meant. She didn't rush to deny it. She didn't make excuses. Instead, she sighed. I saw what happened. Elijah nodded. And yet, you treated Marcus like a customer. No hesitation. Lisa hesitated, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. Because he is a customer. Everyone should be treated that way. Elijah studied her for a moment, then reached into his pocket. Lisa's eyes widened slightly as he handed her his card. Lisa, do you like working here? He asked casually. She hesitated, looking down at the card before looking back at him. I don't know how to answer that. Elijah smirked. Let me rephrase. How would you feel about working for someone who actually values good people? Her lips parted slightly. She understood what he was saying. Behind them, the senior salesman was watching, realization dawning on his face. Elijah turned slightly and met his gaze. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he turned back to Lisa. Think about it, he said. I think you'd fit in a lot better where people actually care. And just like that, the power in the room shifted again. Lisa stared at the business card in her hand, her fingers tightening around the edges. Her heartbeat was steady, but her mind raced. She had never expected to be put in this position, to be standing in the middle of the showroom, an offer lingering in the air while her co-workers watched from the corners of their eyes. The senior salesman cleared his throat, forcing a stiff smile. Mr. Carter, I'm sure Lisa appreciates the gesture, but she's a valued member of our team here. Isn't that right, Lisa? Lisa glanced at him. His voice was friendly, but there was an edge to it. A warning. A reminder of who was in charge. Elijah didn't even look at the man. His focus remained on Lisa. You don't have to answer right now, he said smoothly. I just wanted you to know there are places where people like you are recognized for doing the right thing. Lisa inhaled slowly. She could feel the tension thick in the air. The senior salesman was watching her reaction carefully, and from the other side of the room, the woman at the counter was tapping nervously at her keyboard, stealing glances in their direction. I appreciate that, Lisa finally said, her voice even. Really, I do. Elijah nodded, reading the hesitation in her tone. He could tell she wasn't the kind of person to make a snap decision, especially not with eyes on her. That was fine. He had planted the seed. The senior salesman, sensing the moment slipping away from him, quickly pivoted. Mr. Carter, about your interest in the convertible. Elijah's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his expression calm. Suddenly interested in selling to me now? He asked, his voice smooth but sharp. The salesman forced a chuckle. Of course, sir. We're always happy to assist our customers. Elijah let the words hang between them. The lie was obvious. I don't do business with people who pick and choose who's worth their time, Elijah finally said. That's the difference between a real businessman and someone just trying to make a sale. The senior salesman's face twitched, but he held his composure. He had no choice now. The room had gone silent again. Even customers browsing the showroom had picked up on the tension. A few pretended to be interested in the vehicles, but their ears were turned toward the conversation. Lisa shifted slightly, looking between them. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Elijah turned his gaze back to her, offering the faintest hint of a smirk. You ever notice how people only start paying attention when they think they might lose something? Lisa swallowed. He was right. The senior salesman was only scrambling now because he had realized Elijah Carter wasn't just any customer. Lisa had seen this play out before. Different faces, different circumstances, but the same pattern. The ones with power always got the best treatment, while everyone else had to fight to be noticed. She thought about Marcus, how they had ignored him just like they had ignored Elijah before realizing who he was. She thought about how often she had watched customers walk in, only to be dismissed with forced smiles and half-hearted offers of help. And she thought about her own position here. How she had worked hard, stayed late, picked up extra shifts, yet she still wasn't treated with the same respect as some of the others. The weight of all of it settled in her chest. Elijah studied her expression, recognizing the internal battle. He could tell she was thinking, processing, questioning. That was good. That meant she wasn't just accepting things the way they were. Finally, Lisa looked up at him, her fingers tightening around the business card. "Thank you," she said softly, but with something firm beneath it. Elijah nodded once. He understood. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit. His stride steady, purposeful. The senior salesman hesitated before taking a step forward. "Mr. Carter." Elijah didn't stop. He pushed open the glass doors, stepping back into the cool air. Inside, Lisa exhaled slowly. The weight in her chest had shifted, but it hadn't lifted. Something had changed. And she wasn't sure things at this dealership would ever feel the same again. Lisa stood there, gripping Elijah's business card like it was a lifeline. She could still feel the weight of the conversation pressing on her, the tension lingering in the air even after Elijah had left. She knew everyone in the showroom was watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. The senior salesman let out a breath, adjusting his tie like he was shaking off the encounter. "All right, folks, let's get back to work," he said, forcing a chuckle, trying to act as if nothing had happened. Lisa barely heard him. Her thoughts were racing. She had been working at this dealership for 3 years. She had been the top salesperson more times than she could count. She had done everything right, treated customers fairly, put in extra hours, helped out whenever the team needed her. And yet, she had just witnessed firsthand how easily the wrong people got rewarded, while the ones who actually did the work were overlooked. And now she had a choice. Before she could process it fully, the dealership's front doors swung open again. Everyone turned, expecting to see Elijah returning. But it wasn't him. A tall man in an expensive suit stepped inside, his sharp eyes scanning the room like he was sizing up the entire operation. His presence was commanding, the kind that made people straighten up without realizing it. Behind him, a second man followed, holding a leather briefcase. The senior salesman's face paled the second he saw them. His entire posture changed, stiffening like a child caught doing something wrong. Lisa frowned, her stomach tightening. Whoever these men were, they weren't here to buy a car. The man in the suit strode across the showroom, his steps confident, unfazed by the sudden silence. He didn't even acknowledge the other employees. His focus was locked on one person, the senior salesman. "Mr. Thompson," the man said, his voice smooth but carrying an unmistakable authority. "We need to have a conversation." Lisa noticed Thompson's hands twitch at his sides. "Of course, Mr. Sinclair," Thompson said quickly, forcing a smile. "Let's, step into my office." "No need," Sinclair interrupted, glancing around. "We'll have it right here." A few of the other employees exchanged nervous glances. Lisa could practically hear their thoughts. Who was this man? And why was Thompson acting so afraid? Lisa stayed silent, watching. Sinclair's assistant stepped forward, opening his briefcase and pulling out a thin folder. He handed it to Sinclair, who flipped it open, skimming the first page before speaking. "I assume you know why I'm here." Thompson licked his lips, his smile looking more forced by the second. "I'm not sure I do." Sinclair finally lifted his gaze. "That's disappointing." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. Sinclair turned the folder toward Thompson, tapping a finger on the first page. "This dealership is one of many under our corporate umbrella. We've received multiple complaints about discriminatory practices, customer mistreatment, and unethical sales tactics." The air in the room became thick with tension. Thompson shook his head quickly, laughing nervously. "I assure you, sir, those complaints are exaggerated. We treat all our customers with—" "Save it," Sinclair cut in, his voice sharp. He turned a page in the folder. "Would you like to explain why our mystery shoppers, sent here twice in the last 6 months, were completely ignored unless they fit a certain profile? Lisa's eyes widened. Mystery shoppers. That meant corporate had been watching for a while. Thompson was struggling to hide his panic now. I had no idea. Sinclair raised a hand, cutting him off. That's the problem. Either you knew and you let it happen, or you didn't know, which means you failed as a manager. Thompson was visibly sweating now. Lisa could feel the energy shift in the room. Employees were frozen in place, barely daring to breathe. Customers were pretending not to listen, but it was clear they had picked up on the confrontation. And then Sinclair did something unexpected. He turned to Lisa. She straightened instinctively, caught off guard by his sudden attention. "You're Lisa, correct?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Sinclair closed the folder, studying her. "You're the only salesperson in this dealership who approached the last mystery shopper. You treated them professionally. You followed company standards." Lisa's breath hitched. She didn't even know she had been tested. Sinclair's eyes flicked back to Thompson. "And yet, she is not the sales manager here. You are." Thompson looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Lisa's fingers curled around Elijah's business card in her pocket. She suddenly realized what this moment was. Turning point. Sinclair let the silence stretch for a moment before he spoke again, this time addressing the entire room. "This dealership's reputation is damaged. The treatment of customers has been unacceptable. Changes are coming." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. Sinclair turned to Thompson, his expression unreadable. "Corporate will be in touch." Thompson swallowed hard, nodding stiffly. He knew what that meant. Sinclair gave one last glance around the showroom, his gaze lingering on Lisa for a fraction longer before he nodded to his assistant. Without another word, they turned and left, their exit just as swift as their arrival. The moment the doors closed behind them, the tension exploded. Employees whispered to each other. The woman at the front desk let out a shaky breath. Thompson rubbed a hand down his face, looking like a man who had just watched his entire career flash before his eyes. Lisa, however, stood frozen in place. Her mind replayed the last few minutes. The way Sinclair had looked at her. The way he had pointed out that she had done what was right when no one else had. For so long she had felt stuck here, like her efforts went unnoticed. But now she was at the center of something much bigger. And as she glanced back down at the business card in her hand, she realized something else. She had options. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to use them. Lisa sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel as the events of the day ran through her mind like a whirlwind. The way Elijah had exposed the dealership's bias, the way Sinclair had walked in like a storm, shaking everything up. She had spent years in this place, working hard, proving herself, only to realize in one afternoon that the people in charge had never really seen her. But now they had no choice. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. Hesitating for only a second, she answered. "Hello, Lisa," a familiar voice said. "This is Elijah Carter." Her breath caught slightly. She hadn't expected him to reach out so soon, if at all. "I know this is sudden," Elijah continued, "but I wanted to talk to you before you make any decisions." Lisa glanced back at the dealership through her windshield. Through the glass doors, she could see Thompson pacing in his office, his face still pale from the confrontation with Sinclair. Employees whispered in small groups, glancing toward the manager's office as if waiting for the inevitable. "Go on," Lisa said, curiosity taking over. "I meant what I said earlier," Elijah said. "I don't just do business, I build teams. I build places where the right people get the recognition they deserve. And I think you belong somewhere that actually values you." Lisa swallowed, gripping the phone tighter. "And that's with you." Elijah chuckled. "That's up to you. But I'm offering something more than a sales job. I want someone who understands what it means to fight for customers, to run things with integrity. Someone who's been in the trenches. If you're interested, I'd like to meet and discuss it." Lisa exhaled, heart pounding. This was real. She had spent years proving herself, waiting for an opportunity like this. And now it had landed right in her lap. But before she could respond, she saw something through the dealership window that made her freeze. A man in a dark suit had entered, speaking to Thompson. Unlike Sinclair, this man carried a different energy. Sharp, focused, dangerous in a way that sent a chill down Lisa's spine. Thompson straightened, nodding quickly, his body language stiff. He looked nervous. "Elijah," Lisa said, her voice low. "Something's happening here." "What do you mean?" Lisa narrowed her eyes, watching as the suited man slid a folder across Thompson's desk. Thompson opened it, his face tightening. After a few seconds, he nodded again, this time more urgently. The man then stood, adjusting his cufflinks, and walked out of the office. Lisa ducked slightly in her car as the man exited the dealership and climbed into a black sedan, pulling away smoothly as if nothing had happened. "Something's wrong," Lisa muttered. "Elaborate," Elijah said, his voice serious now. Lisa's mind raced. Folder. The way Thompson had reacted. The way the man had walked in and out like he already knew how the conversation would end. Thompson wasn't just worried about losing his job. He was afraid. "Elijah, I think Sinclair isn't the only one watching this dealership," Lisa said carefully. "I think Thompson just got some kind of warning." There was silence on the line. Then Elijah spoke. "I need you to leave." Lisa's heart pounded. "What?" "Get out of there. Right now." Lisa's grip on the phone tightened. "Elijah, what's going on?" "I'll explain later," Elijah said, his voice urgent. "Just trust me. Don't go back inside." Lisa hesitated for only a second before she made her decision. She put the car in reverse, backing out of the lot, her hands trembling slightly on the wheel. As she pulled onto the road, she cast one last glance at the dealership. Thompson was still in his office, his head down. And then, as if he could feel her watching, he suddenly looked up, his eyes locking onto hers through the glass. Lisa's stomach dropped. There was no anger on his face. No frustration. Only fear. And in that moment she knew, this wasn't just about a bad dealership anymore. She had uncovered something much bigger. And whatever it wasn't over yet. Lisa drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel as her mind raced with everything that had just happened. The weight of Elijah's warning still pressed on her chest, making her pulse quicken. Why had he told her to leave so urgently? Who was that man in the suit? And why had Thompson looked so afraid? She pulled into an empty parking lot a few blocks away, her fingers tapping nervously on her phone. Should she call Elijah back? Should she wait for him to reach out first? Every instinct told her that whatever she had just walked away from wasn't just about a dealership anymore. It was something bigger, something she had unknowingly stepped into just by doing the right thing. Before she could decide, her phone lit up. "Elijah." She answered immediately. "I left. Now tell me what's going on." Elijah exhaled on the other end. "Lisa, listen to me carefully. That man you saw, he's not just some corporate guy. He's part of a private investment group that owns several dealerships, including yours. And let's just say, they don't always operate by the book." Lisa's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "There have been reports, hushed complaints, whistleblowers silenced before they could make a real case. Employees who tried to push back on unethical practices either got fired, blacklisted, or, well, some just disappeared from the industry completely." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "I knew there was something shady about how this dealership was being run," Elijah continued. "That's why I showed up in the first place. But when I saw how they treated me, I knew it went deeper than just bad sales tactics. And then Sinclair showed up. That confirmed it." Lisa pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to process everything. So Sinclair was actually trying to clean it up? "Yes," Elijah said. "But the people running this dealership aren't going to let that happen without a fight. That man you saw, he wasn't warning Thompson. He was giving him instructions." Lisa's breath caught. Instructions for what? To cover it up. To make sure no one talks. And if they think you're involved. Elijah trailed off. Lisa closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling in. She had been so focused on proving herself, on finally getting the recognition she deserved, that she hadn't even realized she had stepped into something dangerous. For the first time, she wondered if she had made a mistake by ever caring about this place at all. But then she remembered something. Thompson's face. The fear in his eyes. And suddenly, she knew what she had to do. Elijah, she said firmly. I'm not running away from this. There was a pause. Lisa. No, she interrupted. I've worked too hard to be scared off now. This isn't just about me. It's about every employee who's been mistreated. Every customer who's been ignored. Every person who walked into that dealership and was judged before they even opened their mouth. She could hear Elijah let out a small chuckle. I had a feeling you'd say that. Lisa smirked. Then tell me how we stop this. The next few days were a blur of careful planning. Elijah connected Lisa with a journalist he trusted, someone who had been investigating shady business practices in the auto industry for years. They gathered testimonies, reviewed documents, and traced every complaint that had been buried under corporate red tape. Sinclair, once he realized what was happening, reached out directly. This won't be easy, he warned Lisa over the phone. They have money, power, and lawyers. If we expose them, they will fight back. Lisa didn't hesitate. Then let them fight. Because they're not the only ones with power. And she was right. When the story finally broke, it sent shockwaves through the industry. The investment group that had been quietly buying up dealerships under the radar was suddenly exposed for a web of unethical dealings, discriminatory practices, and financial fraud. Investigations were launched. Executives were forced to step down. Thompson, in an unexpected turn, flipped on his employers, providing key evidence in exchange for leniency. As for the dealership, it didn't shut down. Instead, it changed hands, this time under new ownership. Ownership that actually valued its employees and customers. And Lisa. She walked into that building one last time, not as an employee, but as someone who had fought for something bigger than herself. Elijah stood beside her, grinning. Told you you had options. Lisa laughed. Yeah. And I finally chose the right one. As she looked around the showroom floor, she no longer felt the frustration, the exhaustion, the endless battle to prove her worth. Instead, she felt something new. Freedom. And for the first time in a long time, she knew. This was just the beginning.